Okay.
Good evening. I'm calling to order the December 12th, 2017 meeting of the Stowe Board of Selectmen, our last regularly scheduled meeting for the year. And as always, I will take public input from any member of the public regarding a matter that is not on the agenda. Seeing none, I move to Chair's comments. In addition to wishing everyone happy holidays, I want to start off by noting the valiant effort by the Neshoba Regional High School football team in the Division IV Championship. A week last Saturday, I was fortunate enough to be able to make it to the game. Regrettably, quarterback Sam Belinsky came down with a broken leg in the very first few minutes of the tibia, I believe it is. In the first few minutes of the game, he's a Stowe resident, and he was replaced by another Stowe resident, at quarterback Breeze Hill, but it was just a tough loss to the team, and they were unsuccessful. But I'm not going to mention all the local Stowe or Neshoba athletes who played in that game, but it was a wonderful season. They deserve a lot of credit, and in high school sports, the effort is always what is important. But going from something less than successful, we now go to something that was enormously successful, and that was the first annual, hopefully, Stowe Holiday Tree Lighting that was helmed by our clerk, Mr. Hawks, and a very public-spirited citizen, Karen Stams. The event was wonderful. It was exceeded by far my expectations for attendance, and there was a lot of young children there. There was some contributions from local merchants. I think I'll just turn over this session of my chairman's comments to our clerk to see if he has anything to add, and to thank him very, very much for putting this together with Karen Stams.
Well, thank you. And the last part is the operative part. Karen Stams was delightful to work with. She was a go-getter. She came up with things at the last minute that filled holes. The music system was donated by friends of hers, along with a playlist. Everything went along well, and she is also a very detail-oriented person. So on a couple of occasions she said, "Do we have this taken care of yet?" And we just locked everything up. Outside of the merchants that cooperated, it wouldn't have been possible without the enthusiastic support of both the police and fire departments, highway department for providing the lights and lighting, some of the force majeure, is that a good one? Force multiplier effects. That,
one or the other, not both.
Yeah, not both? Okay, I shouldn't use words I'm not sure. But cemetery participated as well in the cleanup down there under the new arrangement. And everything went fantastically. We estimated it's real hard to do because you look around and it's kind of in the dark and shadows, and you see a lot of adult heads moving around, and they masked a lot of kids, but I would think that conservatively 300 people there. And the notice didn't even get in the paper until 2 days before, but thanks to electronic media connections that were put out by Stowe, and police put them on their listings, and individuals and the Lake Bloom listing. It just the word got out, and a lot of positive feedback. People coming up to me and to Karen saying, "This is great. How come you haven't been doing it before?" And I said, "Well, it was Karen's idea. Well, we wouldn't be doing it now, I don't think." So I think they're very enthusiastic and hope to put together some kind of a little committee next year to build on the success of this one. So hopefully years from now, we'll look back and say 2017 was was the beginning of something nice for Stowe. It was a pleasure doing it.
It's nice living in a town with all these wonderful events and things happening and public-spirited citizens, so.
Just the last word on that, I didn't get into mentioning specifics, but there will be a thank you letter in the paper tomorrow, giving some specifics for people who donated.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hawks, and because you did such a great job, you're gonna be doing that for next year as well. I've moved up on the agenda correspondence. Is there anything in correspondence that anyone wants to discuss? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that was in correspondence was a note from the Mass Historical Commission,
Yes.
talking about, they have grants available for historic preservation and so on. And Maureen very nicely sent a copy over to the Historical Commission, but when I saw it, I also made a copy. I gave it to Craig Martin because of the town hall renovations that they're considering. And just before I got here, I actually sent a note off to Dot to tell her that Craig had gotten a copy of it and probably be in touch, and I copied Billy and Craig on it, so that maybe we can close the loop on that. And it'd be nice if we could find a way to put in for a grant. You know, the grants are due March 28th, so we've got a little time, and maybe find out what it's all about.
Well, thank you very much for following up on that, Mr. Ryan. The only thing I will add is that it looks like we might have an applicant for the Rec Commission. Please stay tuned on that. Now that brings us to meeting minutes. We do not have the minutes from last meeting, but we do have a rather, well, it wasn't that old. It's minutes from February 14, 2017. I leave it to my colleagues. Do you want to take the motion now or after you make?
I think there's at least one minor change. I don't think it was at the Hill School Library.
I brought that to our aides. And these are, and I also think a couple pages later, it says, "I further moved." I think that was Don Hawks who further moved.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing that I came up with.
Well, then I will take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, I move the minutes of February 14, 2017 as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion or comment? Again, feel free to show, to bring typographical or proofreading matters to our administrative assistant attention directly.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just point out for people that are saying, what are these guys doing sitting around since Valentine's Day? The meeting was snowed out, the one at which we would have gotten to those. So this is just a little housekeeping getting caught up.
Well, that is a good point.
Thank you, Maureen, for getting caught up.
That is a good point, and I hear from our administrative assistant that we should be all caught up after we approve the minutes from last meeting, and of course tonight. And she's gonna double check on that for us. Just as she's been double checking on the executive session minutes. So we do owe her the debt of thanks. Then I will take a vote on the minutes from February 14, 2017 as amended. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous consent. Okay, that now brings us to our treasurer's presentation here tonight. Would you come up, Ms. Landry, and introduce yourself to the people at home, even though we know you very well. Oh, and our town clerk.
Oh, the town clerk. Yes, to witness us.
3 nights ago.
You're always welcome,
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. What we're doing is we're borrowing $492,000, which is the town's portion of the road improvements on the lower village. We're borrowing it 7 months from Unibank at 1.35% interest.
How much?
1.35%.
Oh, that's good.
It's a little bit higher than the last time, but it's creeping up.
And, Mr. Town Administrator, you want to put any context on this, or?
Based on the schedule of values for the construction and such, and it's a safe bet to have the money there. The state was a bit delinquent in coming up with their contract that I didn't sign until last week. They told us not to spend any money and don't do anything, so we didn't.
So they could really
I
get
think they have
started
a
before.
cash flow problem at the state, not this one. I've seen it that way before, in my old days of doing grants.
Well, it is
But
unfortunate.
everything's good and executed, and we're on our way.
That's good to hear, Mr. Town Administrator. Then, Mr. Clerk, would you favor us with a motion?
Deferring tonight to Mr. Salvi.
All right, then,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Salvi, would you step up, please?
Yes, I will step up. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the sale of $492,000 bond anticipation note at 1.35% interest dated December 19th, 2017, and payable July 10th, 2018 to Unibank for the Lower Village project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That again is unanimous. Thank you. Thanks for coming, Ms. Landry. Thank you.
Well, we need you to sign.
May I
sign
ask you a
this.
question? I'm just curious. What's the term of a ban again, 90 days?
Well, this one we're going out till July 10th.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
it's like 8
Right.
months. We did that, so it'll be payable next fiscal year,
Yeah.
but it's close enough to the other bans we have coming due in May that we could combine them.
And we'll do the final bonds when, like 3 years?
I'm not sure. This is actually a very small amount of money in
Yes,
the
it
bond
is.
market, so we might just roll over the bans for several years.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any requirement to be 90 days. It's just an anticipation note.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I
just
usually
curious.
do them for a year, but we decided to do it that way so I could combine it with the other ones that we have out.
I was curious how long that interest rate is good for, and it's until July.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, so when we roll it over in July, it might be something
Yeah, it might be.
higher or lower.
They're
But,
probably going up.
yeah, we'll sign. I think the yellow stickies are where the selectmen sign.
Yeah, if you recall, Jim, we've been saying that for years.
Well,
I
that's
think
true.
about 6 years ago.
Yeah, we keep saying.
It's gonna go up anytime.
Yeah.
But the Federal Reserve is saying it now, sort of, I think.
They have a new chief.
Mhm.
Yep.
I need to sign, yeah, three
Oh, this
things
one
you
too?
need to sign, yeah,
3 things.
yep.
There's the other thing. Excuse me?
Wait just a minute. I'm not as,
Here we go.
I don't have
Messy.
a flourish way the chairman does signatures. Mine is actually readable.
That's what I was gonna say.
Mine is unforgeable.
Yeah, that's true too.
That makes it easier indictment when it's like. That's what I'm saying.
If I'm going down, I'm taking people with me. Let's just all be clear on that. Thank you again for coming. If you might as well wait 30 seconds so we can get these all signed into you. Because we have one of our favorite annual chores, and that is approving our liquor license renewals. I want to, while we're filling dead time, thank our administrative assistant for the work she put in on preparing all the liquor licenses and reviewing the applications to make sure that they are in good form and that the licensees have no problems with the state. That's always time-consuming and cumbersome process, but that is how we license liquor sales in this community and how the selectman's name gets on the wall of every liquor vendor.
Nice vamping.
That's mine.
I have a question.
Filling
I'm
the-
Irish.
filling-
Do these applicants request it, or is this an automatic renewal?
Maureen, I believe it's not.
Do they request a renewal, or is it automatic renewal?
We take it upon ourselves to renew them before theirs expire, so they generally don't ask. We send out notification, ask for paperwork, so. sort
But they
of
send
remind them.
something back? I mean, if
Yes.
someone was out of business and we didn't
Mhm.
know it, they wouldn't just automatically.
No,
Right.
they have to
Okay.
pay
Yeah.
money for it, so if they don't pay them, if
Right.
they don't pay their $25 or $200 or $2,000.
Okay. Thank you.
And our administrative assistant, you do have to do some checking with the state, if I'm not mistaken, to make sure that they're in good order. You have to make sure that the licensees are, don't have any problems with the state.
Yes, we check, yep, we get updates and we get Craig do inspections. Got a whole process, so.
Well, thank you very much for riding herd on that. Excuse us? Excuse us?
TV.
Then, I will take a motion, and I have no problem with taking a slate motion.
What does that mean? Just,
Just referencing this?
Or just, no, just listing them all in one.
Oh, yeah.
oh. Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the town's 2018 liquor licenses for the following businesses: Stowe Food and Beverage LLC, 58 Randall Road; J. Malone and Sons, DBA Stowaway Golf Course, 121 White Pond Road. I'm assuming I don't have to say Stowe. Nick Crow's Spirits, Inc., DBA Colonial Spirits of Stowe, 117 Great Road. Ken's Liquor Shop, Inc., 8 Hudson Street, Hudson Road. Robert Page III LLC, DBA Butternut Farm Golf Club, 115 Wheeler Road. Wedgewood Country Club of Stowe, Inc., 215 Harvard Road. Russell's Convenience Store of Stowe, 390 Great Road.
Wait, wait,
I'm not done, I just paused.
for drama.
The Airfield Cafe, Inc., DBA Nancy's Airfield Cafe, 302 Foxborough Road. Red River Rock, Inc., DBA Red Ginger Restaurant, 117 Great Road.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any questions about these licensees or their applications? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Mrs. Selby's motion for renewing these liquor licenses, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That again passes unanimously. Now we'll start circulating that,
So I have a question.
oh, I'm sorry.
You read the liquor license renewal, but we also have common victualler licenses, and we have a class 2. So should we, is there a motion on the?
I already moved the liquor, I was doing them by,
I know, but I don't,
It says, these licenses are different colors, because some are
I know, this
combined,
one's common victualler.
and liquor combined.
Oh,
Yeah.
and liquor combined?
Yeah,
So we should sign all of these.
yeah.
Did we already,
Alright,
Do we need to vote the common victular aspect first, so that,
or did we do
That's a
that?
separate thing.
Are they separate certificates?
There's a separate common vic, but when they have food and liquor, that's why they're different color
Got it.
licenses.
So the ones that we have on the motion, these are these,
Right.
all of them.
Mhm.
Okay,
That
fine.
batch.
If you
Yep.
see any, if you see anything other in there, let us know.
I know, I was just,
But,
discombobulated, but.
To Mr. Hawk's point, did we already approve these businesses for common victual licenses?
yes, last time
I
we
thought,
did,
yeah.
yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
We had a question
Yep.
on one that was
Package
still
store.
before us tonight.
Yep.
The others were all done.
So,
So did you call the vote?
Yeah.
pardon?
Oh, you called the vote?
Yeah,
Yes, we
you
all did
voted.
the thing,
You-
and
you
I'm
voted
holding
yes.
you up,
You
got it,
voted yes.
fine.
No, we go as, at the pace for everybody. But, seeing that, I would ask Mr. Salvi for another motion regarding the one common victular license, which we didn't get to last time.
I move to renew the town's common victual license for the following business for 2018: Emma's Cafe, 117 Great Road, Stowe.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for a vote to renew the town's common victual license for Emma's Cafe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That again is unanimous. And now, we have something, again, that was left over from last meeting, and it is the Class 2 used car license renewal for Richard Presti, DBA Chapel Partners, Inc.
Do you need a motion?
Wait, one second. I just want to say, there was a question from the audience at the last meeting about whether or not this business could be licensed at the same address as another business. We did our due diligence, we researched that, and the town administrator can fill you in fully, but there is no impediment, either in the bylaws or state regulations, to running two of these businesses out of the same address. But because of your question, we have learned that Richard Presti is not at the same address as another use license. It is at 8492 Great Road. So,
Just to be clear, his property has 6 or 8 different addresses because of the different tenants in the building. Same map and page. When the tax bills go out, it indicates same. So his site from the assessor's office has 82 to 94. I'm just making up the numbers now. But each address indicates a separate business in there. So it's not technically, when it comes to licensing, the same address. It's the same site, same book and page, but like any building that you've been in that has multiple businesses in it, they all have a different address. That's how you get mail to them.
I understand. I just wanted to update everyone on the status of this license request. And now I will take an issue, or excuse me, a question or a comment from the audience. Just please identify your name and address.
I'm Mark Forbes, 9 Pond Road, so I've actually got a bunch of different concerns about issuing a license over there again. Part of it is that the general laws, section of the PAC says that the primary business owner is supposed to be someone who's going to work in a car dealership to get a Class 2 license. It's actually part of your application if you want. Mr. Presti is categorized as a real estate investor, not a used car dealership. The 10 years that the Board of Selectmen have been granting this license to Chapel Partners, there's never been any established car dealership there at all in the name of Chapel Partners. We grant the same license over and over again. There's not, I believe there hasn't been one car sold as Chapel Partners. To me, this is just a ploy on Mr. Presti's part to circumvent the town's bylaws, which for grandfather.
Which bylaw?
The grandfather, two-year non-use bylaw. To keep it in, to keep it in grandfathering. And so he has a 2-year loss of use for the car dealership. It's no longer grandfathered in with the town bylaws.
Would the issuance of the license alone constitute a use? So
Well,
that
this
can't
is-
be the
this-
motivation.
This is where the question comes in, whether it does or it does not. To me, if you're granting a license to a property owner for 10 years and they've never opened up a car dealership of any kind, why would you continue to give them a car license? I mean, it's like someone who doesn't drive. You don't drive, what do they need a license for? It's just foolish to me. Okay. I've actually created a little letter here that I'll just submit to the board in reference to this. And then if he's, I believe the license states a certain location for Chapel Partners, for Rich Presti, on the lot where he actually can sell his cars. So does that mean Infinite Auto no longer is able to sell those, display his cars in that same lot, or that same area that Chapel Partners is getting on? I believe that the board should be asking for a site plan of some kind to ensure that Chapel Partners, even though there's 2 licenses, that they're not intermingling. And if they are intermingling, then the board should be asking for a license in joint names for both of them, rather than 2 separate licenses. And this is just my input to you guys, you know, do the right thing.
Well, we always try to do the right thing.
I understand. So I'm gonna.
And let me just give you my initial thoughts on your input, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Sure.
The reason why the board has granted these licenses for 10 years running is because, as far as I know, this is the first time anyone's made
I understand.
any objection or question.
I understand.
And the license, let me finish, at least during the licensing process, as far as I know.
Thank you.
And I've been on the board only for 3 of these, I suppose. Having said that, the license expires at the end of this year. And we saw each other at the tree lighting, Mark, and I told you that this issue that you'd raised had been cleared up. If we had had this letter before tonight, we might have been able to do something more, on your requests and your inquiries, but it'll lapse if we don't vote on it tonight.
I think the license shouldn't be renewed in the first place, because there's no bearing for it. He hasn't sold a car or anything else in 10 years.
I take your point, but we're going by your, and again, I'm gonna turn this over to my, I'll take Kathy's comments, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I take your point. Unfortunately, I have no way of verifying that. We have no way of bringing in Mr. Presti at this point to hear his side. This is just kind of a little late in the year. Kathy?
One of the concerns I have is I'm gonna direct a butter, Kathleen Fisher, 1 White Pond Road. Things go out, this is licensing. There's no notices that ever go out to an abutter for a new license, for a liquor license, for a car dealership, for a gun shop, that I understand is going. There's no notices that go out to anybody who's a neighbor. Nothing. And I find that upsetting, because I didn't know this was even issued, that he had been getting it for a number of years, until issues came up, because there wasn't anything there for 3 years. So I just wanted to make a point that the gatekeeper, which is representing the citizens, letting us know what's going on in our community, that information is not distributed in any way, shape, or form for licenses at this point. There's no requirement under any of the laws that I could find, because I read a lot. I happened to go last week's meeting for another issue, not for this, and I happened to hear it come up.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you were here 2 weeks ago, and you raised questions about the license application, and we held off because we wanted to assure ourselves that your questions are answered, but this seems like a whole new set of questions. And it's not something that you guys didn't have notice of. But having said that, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Can I give you the application?
It's no different
You actually have it?
than us walking in
Answer your
tonight and saying that
questions.
the address has been changed. It was a new revelation to us as well, that now he's not applying. He granted the license to 102 Gray Road for Mr. Presti for 10 years. And now tonight, because I brought it up last meeting, now that the address changes, why did it change?
We've got new information, but here's the thing. We put it over because we knew we'd have another meeting before the end of the year. I'll turn it over to my colleagues and see their thoughts. Mr. Ryan.
If we've been giving it out for 10 years, 1 more year isn't gonna make a difference. And, you know, to your point, it's gonna expire at the end of this year. And if there is a problem with it, we can look into it in the future. But, you know, it's not going to, if we don't give it to him, and we haven't given him a chance to talk to us about it, we're doing him a disservice. And I think we should just go forth, and then we can look into it in the next year.
Mr. Hawks.
Thank you. I think the fact that any individual, and just discount the present circumstance, might, from a business perspective, either exercise the license once it's granted or choose not to, is none of our business. It's a business decision, and if this person has been duly licensed all these years, he could have done business. We don't know that he hasn't, as pointed out by Mr. Salvi. And I don't think that should enter into our consideration at this point. I think, as Chairman correctly pointed out, this letter, which was given to us today but not dated today, should have been dated today, if we had first seen it. Even if the allegations are correct, I don't know as it would constitute grounds for not doing so, but I don't think we have that luxury. I think we put it over for 2 weeks, and I think we should vote on it tonight.
Any other thoughts?
Could I add just a couple of comments?
Of course, Mr.
Based on the
Turner.
nature of the complaints and deficiencies with regard to process or permitting, I don't find fatal flaws here. What I would suggest is if you're otherwise inclined to continue to provide the license that the board has for 10 years to do so, you have the right under the statutes to pull that at any time. If you want to undertake a due diligence process here on some of these other matters, and the reports that come back are such that you want to reconsider, you can do that at any time. I don't see the harm being done. Evidently, if there was some harm to the community that was occurring because, but it's inactivity that's being accused here, so I don't know how that harms anybody by not doing something that otherwise would offend, let's say presumptively. So whether you approve or not, I leave that too. I'm just saying I don't think harm would be done. He submitted his check, he's gone through the process that he's been asked to go through by the Selectmen's office for all those years, and so I would say this, that I'd like to read the letter myself, would be happy to pursue those things on my own or what the board would like me to. And if there's substantive enough reason to reconsider, you have the right to do that, and you can deny him the permit any time after this.
Can I add something?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
So, as I think I guess my first point is I think the zoning questions are separate, because I think that's about actual selling of cars, and the grandfathering is something different than the licensing. As I read this statute, the thing about it being the principal business is buying or selling secondhand motor vehicles is the first clause of several clauses. And then there's also a person who purchases and displays secondhand motor vehicles for resale in retail transactions, and any other person who displays secondhand motor vehicles not owned by him pursuant to an agreement in which he receives compensation, which sounds like consignment. So it sounds like it's a lot broader than just principal business. Two questions were raised at the meeting 2 weeks ago. One has been pretty solidly answered, which is, can you issue 2 licenses to the same piece of property? Yes. The second question was, are cars being sold, or I would say intended to be sold, apart from Infinite Automotive? In other words, is there another business there where Mr. Presti is selling or intends to sell businesses? I've taken the hint from the town administrator. I think I'd like to make a motion to approve the license, subject to verification from the landowner that he is selling or intends to sell cars apart from Infinite Automotive on that site.
Is that something that we can require of a licensee, Mr. Town Administrator?
You can condition your decision any way you'd like to, any lawful purpose. I mean, it won't be a condition, the permit itself, what you would do is you wouldn't render the final writing on the permit that you execute. You would have, at this moment, an attachment under the motion that conditions being met, then it would read straight up that the Class 2 license is issued for the purposes of sale of used vehicles.
Mr. Chairman, but that seems to be a distinction without a difference, as you say, between, if you're.
Yeah, you could either do it my way or Jim's way, which is.
Your
if we
way is
find
just
something-
write it.
One at a
Those
time,
same
one at
way.
a time, please.
And if you just issue it under a motion tonight, and as you indicate, if we find there are substantial discrepancies or problems with it, we could revisit it later, call them in if necessary, do whatever we need to do, and if it finds material problems, then cancel it at that point or revoke it.
Yeah.
So that, what we,
So you're saying the motion would then just be just to approve it?
yes.
No.
Right.
Ingeborg first, please.
Did a copy of this get sent to Mr. Presti?
No, this
Yeah.
actually was very last minute, we had a little time to do research finally, because I've been a little ill this last week.
No, it's
Sorry.
So,
Thanks. So then my other point was, I know we're debating the process here, but one of the questions that we could ask Mr. Presti is to more clearly define the area, because right now it seems fairly broad. So if we are inclined to pursue more information on this license, that could be one of the questions that's asked.
We should definitely bring Mr. Presti into this at this point.
Yeah, he needs to, I mean, he requested the license, he paid for it.
Yeah.
He is unaware, presumably, that there are concerns about his application. So I agree with the chair that we can't delay this tonight without having additional information from Mr. Presti, the applicant. But I'm happy to hear that we have the ability to review this and revoke it as necessary in the upcoming year.
Mr. Ryan, you're gonna close us off on this discussion.
Yep. Part of it is, I think Don made a very good point, as far as, you know, somebody can pull a license and then use it or not necessarily use it, and that is a separate issue from the zoning. And I believe, you know, and this is, it just goes back to when I remember a number of people that have sold cars. I think if you sell more than 5 cars a year, you need to have a dealer's license, which is probably this. I don't know all the details of the law, but, you know, it can be incidental to your business. So it's not necessarily the primary business, but, you know, so it's, and that's it. Even if I didn't have a car, I would definitely have a license.
Well, to sum up, I think board, I think we're gonna move on. I think
I just wanna ask about the address, that was all. What address is gonna be issued under the old address or his new
no,
address?
the new one, as I said, 8492 Great Road, and you'll hear it in a second.
I'm sorry.
I think the board has decided that the right thing to do here is to take action on this motion, to refer this to our town administrator for follow-up. And then, if the town administrator thinks it's advisable, he will recommend that after reviewing this, because quite frankly, I can't even read with these glasses the statute, so statutory interpretation is kind of tough.
It's on your website as well.
It's on the app.
I know, but I don't have the website in front of me either.
Do you have it with you?
But, I mean, the point here is, I just can't make a decision like this on the fly.
Understand.
So, we will follow up, just as we followed up on the address issue. And we will, the town administrator will come to us with a recommendation if he thinks Mr. Presti needs to come in here to address any of these issues. As to zoning concerns that you may have, there's an enforcement mechanism in the town that you can follow. I'm sure you're familiar with.
We are.
But you can, just as we followed up before on your concerns, we'll follow up again,
Appreciate that.
because that is the right thing.
Would there be a timeframe involved with
Not gonna be this year.
With all
I understand.
with all deliberate speed, with everything else we have to do, I won't unnecessarily not move forward, it's not my approach to things, so.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
insistence.
And I was able to advise you that we'd cleared up that issue that you raised last time at the tree lighting, which was only a few
That was
days later,
very nice,
because
by the way.
because our town administrator had researched the issue and gotten back to us right away. So he's a quick turnaround artist. I don't think you'll have to worry about that. It's just that our board isn't gonna meet anymore this year.
I understand that. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your understanding. Having said that, I will take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the town's Class 2 license for the following business for 2018. Richard Presti, Chapel Partners, Inc., 84-92 Great Road, Assessors Map R29, Parcel 85A.
Second.
All right, and with the understanding that we will be following up, I'll take any further discussion or comment? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and our town administrator will follow up.
Thank you.
Which now brings us, and I was really meaning to ask somebody to go grab Jesse while we were having that debate, but
Text them for me.
I'm heading there if you want me to tell him.
yes, please, send him down,
Red Rover.
because I will now have to vamp more.
Just give him an invite, see.
It's more of an invite, it's a command
A requested invite.
command invitation,
Yeah, exactly.
command presentation. Does it make any sense for the town administrator to begin his
If you'd like.
report? We can suspend when Mr. Steadman gets here. But I read with great interest the town administrator's, oh,
There he is.
there he is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Speak of the devil, and he will appear.
Your steam has.
He used that term.
It took me a while to figure out
Well,
what it was supposed to mean here. Yeah.
It's kind of a Mephistophelian look.
It's just common folklore. I
No
really,
worries.
I have nothing offensive with it.
No, that's all good.
But thank you very much for coming down. This is Jesse Steadman, our town planner, and he wishes to give us the planning board's thoughts and work on the new marijuana law. And he's given us a very helpful memo from last week. I hope everyone's had a chance to review it, because the town needs to consider some various options here. Mr. Steadman,
correct.
I'll turn over the meeting to you.
Sure, okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I guess what I'll do is kind of go through a little bit of what I put, add in maybe a couple of pieces here, just kind of explaining, where we are in the recreational marijuana timeline as far as state policy goes, and then some of the options like the chair just mentioned that Stowe has before it. So I added the timeline on the front of the memo, which now in hindsight I realize is probably tough to read, but the purpose of it was basically to show that it's not lost on the state that the towns and towns throughout Massachusetts have their warrants getting ready fairly shortly here in a few months, and everybody, a lot of towns have moratoriums, several of which are just like ours that end in November of 2018. And so really the time to be thinking about this is going to be over the winter, and so that's why I added the timeline in there. And that was similar, the same to the medicinal marijuana bylaw, where we waited for the DPH to put out some regulations. In this case, we're really just waiting for the Cannabis Control Commission to release their regulations. I know that the Mass Municipal Association has been trying to put a little more pressure on them to maybe release information that would be helpful to municipalities so that they can go forward and meet their deadlines regarding their town meeting submissions and all of that stuff.
Have they filled out the commission membership? Yeah.
They do have yeah,
They
they
have
do,
complete.
yep. So now they're actually, doing the work, and we're kind of waiting to see what comes from it. I honestly don't think, and I hope that I'm not wrong, but I don't think that what they're going to provide is going to be something that will drastically change the way we would approach at least the framework of a recreational marijuana bylaw. When we went through the medicinal marijuana bylaw process, it's the same. It was the same kind of thing, meaning it was a time, manner, and place kind of bylaw. So we had an idea of, we talked with a bunch of other planners and people in other states, and got an idea of like what are they likely going to look like based on what other states have had. What's the expected parking? All the kinds of things that we think about in the planning department. And we were able to come up with a bylaw and come up with an overlay district that I think was effective, or would be in the case of getting a permit. And so I think that most of the same rules are going to apply with recreational marijuana. Obviously, there are some distinct differences that we need to think about from land use. So, for instance, the fact that these are not necessarily production and manufacturing facilities, although they could be, but they could be retail outlets. And unlike medicinal marijuana, others have noted that you may have a lot more customers at a recreational facility. So, so some of the actual metrics in a bylaw, such as parking requirements and things like that, could change. I know that they're expected to provide a little bit more on the signage aspects. I know the law talked a little bit about signage, that you couldn't be any more prohibitive than, I think it was the regulations around liquor stores and things like that. So we have some guidance, and so I'll leave that kind of there. I do feel that I feel like we can put together a fairly good framework as a start, and continue to move forward, and then have something ready that if we do need to plug in something new or understand something new once the CCC issues their regs, I'm fairly confident that we can do that. Now, if it gets on to the fact where they haven't issued any regulations in, let's say, April, or heading really close to town meeting, and we've already put out our warrant, I think it's at that point we may have to decide whether or not we would somehow potentially want to request a special town meeting to do it prior to the expiration of our moratorium, or take some other action, So we'll just have to I'm kind of still hopeful a few months out that they're going to get it together, they're going to issue their regs, and we'll be able to go forward in May, but we shall see.
Just let me frame this issue for the folks that might be watching at home, in addition to Mom. Hi, Mom. The question that's facing the town is actually kind of heuristic. There are a couple of steps first. The town could make a decision that they do not want to have recreational marijuana production, distribution, or retail, if they follow the procedures that you've outlined in your memo. They could also make a decision that they don't want to have on-site consumption of marijuana at retail. I don't know if it would include production and distribution. They'd also have to make that kind of a decision. And then, if they don't care to put that to the town, then the planning board would be working to create bylaws consistent with the regulations that we expect from the CCC, and that hopefully we'll get some drafts in March that would just say how big these retail establishments must be, how much parking, yada, yada, yada. What we're really dealing with, as far as we're allowed to under the law, is how will town permit, and then, if it does permit, regulate the sale, distribution, and production of marijuana. Do I state that fairly correctly?
Yes.
You want
Yeah.
to
Go
call me
for
on
it.
anything I just said?
Yeah, no, I think, no, I mean, you've got it. So basically, the reason why I described the process of the bylaw is that, in reality, if we're probably gonna put this bylaw together regardless of where we think the town is headed, because the reality is we don't know where the town is headed. So just to get back to it, there are several options available to a town that voted yes in favor of the recreational ballot. So I think what I had
Which we
was-
did.
Yep, Stowe was 53.7% in favor for the ballot measure. So we've been kind of going forward as, we'll put together a recreational marijuana bylaw in the event that certain things happen and the town decides to take a vote on maybe some limitation, some or all of the limitation. If it fails, we still have a bylaw there regardless. So that was kind of the strategy on our end, is that regardless of where we were headed, we're gonna have it anyway, and if we need it, great, we'll use it. So just to get back to some of the options, because we're what they call a yes community, we can do a few different things. And so I tried to break it down in terms of, the avenue that we can take. So through a town meeting vote, we can create this bylaw, the zoning bylaw. We can approve it for managing time, place, and manner, like I was discussing, of the different recreational marijuana sales and production and manufacturing facilities. We can increase the number of establishments to greater than 20% of our package store licenses. Unfortunately, some of the legal folks are not really sure if that means greater than 20% of licenses you've issued or that you have available. That has yet to be determined. So you can increase via town meeting. And then you can also vote to impose a 3% sales tax, which is allowed in the statute, on top of the other taxes at the state level, and the excise taxes and those kinds of things. So that's what you can do via town meeting vote. From a townwide ballot measure, that's when you can, through a townwide ballot measure, you can limit or prohibit some or all of the different avenues for producing or selling recreational marijuana. And you could restrict the number of establishments to less than 20% of those licenses issued for package stores. And then, as the chair was just mentioning, restrict the sale of marijuana for on-site consumption. So you may have, for instance, you could get a permit for a special events. Just think of like a beer garden.
A
bona fide.
Exactly, a one-day kind of thing. So this on-site consumption aspect. So there is also that method. There is also a method for restricting that, and that gets into the weeds a little bit, but I did put it at the end.
Weeds?
Sorry.
That's pretty good.
I can't even
Quite
help it at this
clever,
point.
quite clever.
And then the last piece is the host community agreement. And so the host community agreement is probably the least talked about that I had seen, but basically, this basically allows the town to create impact fees, and that up to 3%. And it has to have some nexus and proportionality to the actual impact that the use would bring to the town. I think when I think of impact fees in like a regular land use setting, it's more about, does this development take us beyond what our public safety department has in terms of apparatuses? Can we actually reach the buildings that folks want to build? Can we actually handle all of these new residents. So impact fees, obviously, on a recreational marijuana facility, manufacturing plant may be a little different. Not sure what that will look like yet, but nevertheless, there's this tool to be able to do that. So that's what the host community agreement is.
Well, thank you very much for giving us such a comprehensive analysis of a very important issue to this town. As always, we greatly appreciate your input, and for the record, I was wrong when I said that pushing off the moratorium to November 18th might be risky. It looks like you were right after all.
I was following town council.
Okay.
When in doubt, that is
Well,
what I will do.
When in doubt,
So,
don't
yeah.
follow Burke, follow town council.
Can I ask a
But-
question?
Yeah, I was just
Oh,
about
I'm
to say,
sorry.
having said that, I will now turn this matter over for discussion or questions or comments from my colleagues. And, Mr. Salvi, you seem to have one?
He was packing up, so I thought he was going.
No.
How,
He was.
how does
He's not
the,
going anywhere, though.
He didn't realize.
How does the ballot measure get on the ballot? Does it first require a town meeting vote, like borrowing does?
Yeah. No, I think it's a submission of a petition of at least 10% of the voters in Stowe. And that's, I believe that it's more of a petition type thing than going to a town meeting first. I'm just looking back through my notes here.
Can it be initiated by the selectmen?
That's what,
Yeah.
or the planning board? That's what I was.
That's the language I was looking for when I was
Yeah.
going through this in the statute, but I did not see that, so I don't know if it's, anybody is restricted from putting forward the petition, or if it's the selectmen, or if it could be a group of citizens. I suppose that it could be both.
Well,
Sure.
I think one of the things in here is it's actually a much lower bar.
Mm-hmm.
If, the note you put in here is signed by not fewer than 10% of the number of voters of Stowe voting at the state election preceding the filing of the petition.
Yep.
So the thing is, if only 20% of the registered voters
That could be
voted,
right.
it would be 10% of the 20%.
Yeah.
Not
Maybe
10%
like
of
100
the-
people.
How much
Yeah.
is that?
It's probably about
Yeah.
200 people.
Yeah,
If
but
you
they have to be sober.
We get
Not so much this-
And-
500 something is a big election, a big municipal election here.
So it'd be
So that's
It's
like
a
100
state
people.
election,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Madam-
so to get a petition on there, the bar is low, is what you're
Right,
saying, yeah.
that's what I'm
If my,
saying.
if my colleagues will permit me, Madam Clerk, do you have any ballpark of what that might, what a petition number that might be?
I didn't hear all of what Tom said, but
20%.
we have 5,000 registered voters.
But 20%,
10%.
Of the last
10%.
state turnout.
yes, 10% of the last state turnout.
So we're talking about 2018?
No,
2017.
2016.
That was
2016.
85, we had an 85% turnout.
It's gonna be like close to 1,000 people.
We had an 85% turnout out of 5,000 registered voters.
Because that was the
85%?
that was the presidential
On the
election,
presidential election.
was a state election.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, so,
We had over 4,000.
so it's,
So it'd be
Close
almost
to-
400 at that point.
so about 400.
But my point is, it's not 10% of the registered voters, it's some
Yeah.
number less.
So those names have to be certified on a petition?
It says conforming to the provisions of general laws relating to initiative petitions. And I'm not,
At the municipal level.
at the municipal, I'm not too,
We don't have to get into the weeds yet, I'm just ballparking what it would require
Yeah,
from.
I'll need a few.
I'm sorry, I thought you said 20%, not 10%.
no fewer than 10%.
10%,
Yep.
oh.
10%.
No, it was Mr. Ryan who said 20% might have voted last election. That confused
I
me.
was,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Here's his ballpark. So if citizens in this town wish to put a petition together that would put this question to a vote, they need to get together and mobilize 400 of their own,
And the thing is, that's for restricting on-site consumption. That's not for any of the other things that.
Oh, isn't that out for prohibiting it as well?
And it is also limiting it to no more than 20% of your liquor license.
It's for a ban too.
Yep, I think that's the general process that they're taking.
But I'm assuming
below
you
that.
could have a ballot question that says, does the town want a ban?
Yeah.
If the answer to question one is no, does the town wanna have on-site consumption? If the answer to question one is no, does the town wanna limit it to 20%? You could put all three of these questions before the voters at the same time.
That makes sense, but we'd have to double check that, but right now, the only way that you see, Mr. Steadman, is through citizen petition, not through something the board might, sponsor?
I don't see, in what I read, I didn't see anything that said that it couldn't come from the Board of Selectmen, but that's getting a little bit beyond what I had
I understand.
looked into, yeah.
It's a town council question.
I think the board
Yeah.
should be neutral on this.
Well, we're not talking about whether we should take a
No.
position, we're just
No.
whether we could.
But it would not be whether or not we are in favor of it. We might say,
But why would we work to support a petition or sponsor a petition?
I
to
could
give the
see,
town the right to determine, given the facts as they now exist versus what they did on a day when people were voting in a national election, is the town comfortable with hosting such facilities?
To Ms. Hageman Clark's point, maybe I was unclear, I would feel awkward in trying to support a citizen's petition. That's something that I just said, if citizens want to fight this, they have to get together and organize it. But there was another possibility that the Board of Selectmen alternatively could present it, and we still haven't figured that out. But in terms of that, yes, I agree with you about citizen petition. I don't think we could sign it, but it's not something that the board would.
As individuals,
As
we can choose
individuals.
to sign or not.
Yeah. But we were just going to find out if that's the only way that the question of permitting, and regulation could be brought to the town voters. Any other thoughts?
I think technically, the language intends to say it's going to be caused or not by a sufficient number of citizens signing a petition. I don't think,
do we have a mechanism?
I don't think the means by which it gets started is important, meaning to say whether the Board of Selectmen, though I would say if the consensus on the board was not necessarily in support of it, why would you want to? I mean, they know the rules, let the citizens drive it technically, but I think it's a petition process in the end, and if you meet the threshold, it goes forward or it doesn't. I don't know, and I'm speculating here, that it would prescribe that you couldn't, as a board, say, why don't we put a petition out there and see if we get the number.
Oh, I'm not saying that we should, and I don't think that's the
But wasn't that the
procedure.
question whether you could initiate it or not?
That
I'm
was
thinking
certainly,
you probably
that was
can.
certainly my question.
That was being discussed, that's correct.
And I think Ingeborg was trying to discourage it by saying, why would we?
Or I was just trying to say that the Board of Selectmen should remain neutral on the subject.
I'm
In my opinion.
anticipating the question, particularly if we get such an establishment, or particularly if we get a place where there's on-site consumption. Why didn't you people, meaning the Board of Selectmen, ban this? Or at least, why didn't you put it on the ballot? And I wanna know, ahead of that question being asked a year from now, whether we even can do that. Because I think the answer to the question may be very simple. We can't. We can't do it. 400 people have to do it. But if that isn't the answer, then I'd like to know that.
I'm simpatico with Mr. Salvi. I think there are two questions. One is, we already know about the petition process, and I agree with you, that doesn't have much of a role for the Board of Selectmen. But I also agree with Mr. Salvi, if there is a procedure by which the Board of Selectmen can put this on for townwide vote, I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying we should know that. Does everyone agree with
Well,
that?
that's a legal question, isn't it? It's not a question for Jesse Steadman.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
It's
no,
not a
I'm
policy
not saying it
question.
is, I'm not
Stuff
saying
out
it
What
there.
good's our
I'm
planner
sure,
if you
yeah.
won't
Yeah.
speculate?
Everybody else acts like a lawyer, why should I?
Some of us aren't attorneys,
I wasn't suggesting Mr. Steadman
Yes, it's a
answer.
legal
I'm sorry,
question.
I'm being overly critical right now.
I've got some planning opinions I'd like to share.
Why don't we bring this back?
I think, you know, the issue of having a town meeting, people, to Jim's point, will be fully aware of this and will have an opportunity to vote on whatever option is
Well,
Not on a ban,
Not a
No.
ban.
Not on the ban, but on the regulations.
right.
not on a ban, not on banning, on-site consumption, not on limiting it below 20% of your liquor licenses. There's certain questions that can only be done by ballot initiative.
Mr. Ryan, I'm sorry.
You know, I think this is very good, Jesse. I much appreciate you putting it together, you know, even if you don't have all the details. Because I think what it does is it tells us, you know, you're working on the bylaw to straighten it out. The second thing that we'd have to do via town meeting vote, which we would have to do, we would have to initiate, is if we wanted to increase the number of establishments to greater than 20. Which I can't, you know, I'm speaking for myself, but I can't see us doing that the first go-around. Maybe in 10 years if we decide we need 40%, but I can't see us doing that. But the third one is impose up to a 3% local sales tax. So the thing is, if we want to bring that to town meeting, we should keep that in mind and gin up a ballot question. You know, and then we can start looking at the, you know, the other stuff, but the first three there are ones that apparently we would have control of as the selectmen and putting the warrant together. So,
You didn't mean on the 3% local sales tax that you said gin up a ballot question. You meant gin up something for town meeting vote.
yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah.
So Jim speaking.
Yeah.
Or
Or the weeds.
THC speaking, whatever.
But, yeah, no,
Trying to improve.
but, you know, and then to know what kind of options there are. If somebody, to your point, Jim, somebody says, hey, why didn't you do this? We're talking about it now so people can be aware of it, and if they wanna go forward, God bless.
True.
And we can easily get a question, why did you do it, if we did do that? You know,
Mhm.
so even if
Right.
the town was split.
Absolutely.
So that's why okay, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, Mr. Chair.
No.
You may take control of the meeting.
You know, I don't think I ever lost it, at least not tonight. I want to hear people's thoughts on this. This is a very important issue. It's probably going to affect the town more than anything else we do in the foreseeable future. I think that Jim's points were well taken. I think Ingeborg's points are well taken. The one thing I would add in conclusion, unless somebody else wants to say anything, is that if there is a drive to get a citizen's petition to put this on for a townwide ballot measure, assuming that's the only way it can get on, I wish they'd do it sooner rather than later. Maybe that's the message I'd like to get out, because we could save a lot of time drafting regulations and zoning bylaws if we knew this was coming up for a vote.
I think to Jesse's point, though, we would still
You have to be ready.
do up the
Regulations.
regulations
In case the
for
ballot-
zoning
In case the ballot vote
in case it fails.
So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter when they do it.
But on the other hand, and again, I'm not saying this is the way we should go, I'm just raising this as a possibility. We could have, if this was coming up for a vote in May, and I'm not saying it should, I'm saying that if it did come up for a vote in May, to either ban it, retail sales, or to regulate retail sales, if it did come up for a vote, it might be a better use of the planning board's time to wait to see the results of that, and then work on the bylaws over the summer. Just a thought.
Yeah, duly noted.
So we would know that sooner if those petitions are so inclined, those petitioners, who would be petitioners, would be so inclined to get started early. I'll take a point from our
A technical
clerk.
question, just to confirm about petitions on the annual warrant to begin with. I think they would have to be in place in February? And the timeline, if I'm recalling it back past, warrant articles and petitions, I think they would have to be in place in February in order to have those petitions to be on the warrant. And then the ballot questions, the wording for the ballot questions have to be to the clerk, 35 days prior to, I mean, I forget what it is. I forget that there's a deadline, and I'm thinking February, mid-February for those petitions, which is not very far away.
If there are people who are considering a petition, I suggest they start working on this right now, and we can provide more guidance about petitions if we hear people are getting together to drive for a petition. Mr. Ryan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you again.
I was gonna say, I think, we've had overlay districts for things that we might get requests for in the past, right? We had an overlay district before we ever had an AAN. I wanna say, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we've got an adult entertainment district that's about 6 by 6 feet somewhere out by the airport. I'm not sure, but.
We must.
Because it was required that, a number of years ago, that, if you were gonna regulate it, you had to regulate it before somebody came in, and then, so, there are, I think, reasons to have an overlay district regardless, which is, I think was your point with, why you were gonna be drafting it up.
Yeah, it's probably the way to go. The reason this is a little different is because you have retail sales, processing, testing, manufacturing. There's all these different, so it's likely gonna be a little more complicated than the medicinal, which was fairly cut and dry, and we really fit it into some of our industrial and commercial uses. This one might span a few different areas. I'm only just kind of guessing at what it could look like, but nevertheless, yeah, an overlay is usually the way to go, so that you don't have to change underlying zoning. You can choose to use an overlay district to get to a certain end, or you can ignore.
Mr. Hawks, I'll give you the last word on the subject tonight.
Thank you. I've asked you this question before informally, but have we had any interest expressed by business developers looking at this issue more than just in passing?
Yeah.
Come to you?
I met with a couple of firms on the medical side last year. I think something had happened at the state. Suddenly there was some movement and there was a little flurry of action. Nothing ever came of
But
it.
nothing on the recreation?
Nothing on the recreational side. There's just been a lot of rumor and expectation that certain businesses are trying to kind of position themselves to be potential sales outlets in the future. I don't know if any of that is for real or not. So it hasn't really gotten to the point where we're getting any real solid information on who may be looking for a license yet.
Well, thank you for giving us what you can possibly give us to date, and we'll be looking for further information down the pike. And just to anyone listening at home, we're only talking about selling, distribution, testing, and production. You can still grow on your own up to a point, and we can't do a thing about that. Now, thank you, Mrs. Steadman.
You're
We'll let
welcome.
you go. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. You're welcome. Now that brings us to the town administrator's report, and it's a little different this time, insofar as it's not about the town administrator's activities over the past 2 weeks. It's more about some financial analysis and figuring he's been doing in anticipation of putting together the budget next year. Is that fair to say?
Yes, except it is an activity line. I work on this regularly, so, and it's that time of year, so.
I
It's an
didn't mean to-
activities report, but it's in the form of a financial status report.
I didn't mean to suggest you were idle the last 2 weeks, Mr. Town Administrator. But this is more of a general looking forward.
Let's
kind
get
of-
started. Well, So financial status report, it's a working document that I have been doing for probably 15, almost 20 years. And for me, it enables me to look at trending on the budget side and the tax side. And I'm always tweaking it. And I don't know, were you able to, in fact, I tweaked portions of 2 pages, the last 2 pages in that document, and she will be passing out to you the tweaks. And because what I try to do is I try to make clear what I think are the significant figures and not have you go through every chart and all the numbers, because it might be difficult for me to explain them all sufficiently in more than one meeting so that you understood the full value of them. And there's a nexus between several of these documents. But in any event, so she'll provide you the last 2 pages.
Do you mean she provides
Yeah,
it
they
now?
should, I don't know, maybe she already gave it to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll get to those at the back end. So, and it relates to, we've got financial policies in place, as you know. They talk to debt and reserve and trusts and OPEB, and we updated them when we went to AAA, and we signed off on the last updates 2 or 3 years ago now, I've forgotten exactly when. So it all flows together for me. But it's got interesting information. So on page 1, which is the analysis of change in free cash, so if you want to know how that exercise works and how DOR in the end approves as a must before we can spend any free cash, go through a certification process. So free cash, this is the current certification on page 1. And at the top it says free cash that was certified 7/1/2016, which is the baseline we're starting with. Starts with what we use for free cash, and that's all in parentheses, that total $430,000. Works all the way down the sheet. We have give-backs each year, which build to our free cash. Departments give back money. We had an especially large give-back in this last fiscal year because we had a number of positions that went unfilled for a period of time in the police department, Board of Health, and other places included here. And in the end, it's whatever remains is an unexpended balance of actual to budget. That gets built back into the free cash. So you work yourself all the way down to the bottom. Certified free cash 7/1/2017, which is $2,787,417. That was the amount that I gave you a few weeks ago when we got the certification from it. So that's what we have available to us in this fiscal year. Typically, the only expenditures of free cash come at the annual town meeting or at a special town meeting. If the tax rate's been set, it's the only available money to us to spend after, say, November. We've had fall town meetings in the past where I've used free cash if the tax rate had been set, and is presuming free cash has been set, which we try to get done in September. And our account, first of all, I want to give kudos to our accountant. Julie Costello is a damn good accountant. She's been with us for a while. Appreciate her efforts. And all of these numbers come from her. So I just want you to know that. And she makes few mistakes. I found in any event. So on page 2, gives you a trending of the use of free cash starting in 2007-8 all the way through to the current year. So it tells you what we began with, what we spent, overlay reserve included if we did that, if it had gone to free cash. And it's got the ending balance for free cash used. And again, starts in 2007, runs us all the way up to the current fiscal year, and it shows the $2,787,417. If you look back to 2007, we had $434,769 in free cash. And so we've been building, and a question that's often asked with regard to how much free cash. So when we wrote our new policies and adjustments for the bond companies look from 5 to 15% of your reserves, stored asset, free cash for us. Stabilization fund gets carved out and treated separately. But so when I got here, we were negative free cash, just to give you an example. We were working our way out. We've been working a long time. And so at the current moment, with this year's budget as passed, and what I expect to put into next year's budget, we will have about 10% reserve. And I'd like to stay at about 10%. So it's in between the minimum and the maximum. And it gives you an amount of reserve that my belief is in the years to come, protect it because you're gonna need it. And what you don't wanna do is run into what happened to Stowe in the late 80s and early 90s. They ran out of stored assets, couldn't get overrides passed, blew up. And for me, this year, to get us at the spot pegged at 10%, I'll be probably spending $666,000 in free cash. So we end FY17 at the spot. And typically I use it to buy down the cost of rolling stock and capital projects and other things, which I would do again this year, but at a larger amount to get us to that spot. But I think 10% is a number that I feel is comfortable. I don't think it's overly rich, because it wouldn't take but a couple of years of excessive assessments by the two schools and the increase in that debt burden that's coming from when we get fully loaded on the new Minuteman school, and depending on what the high school, Neshoba, improvements do, they're going forward with the process of getting queued up for a statement of interest. You'll need this, and you'll need some unused levy capacity, which we have as well, and I'll mention. So just works you through the free cash so that you know where we've come from, where we spent. The next page, 3, does the same thing with the stabilization fund. And again, our reserve policy sets 3% for the stabilization fund, and we're at that spot right now, 2.99 or 2.98. We haven't been putting any more into it because I've shifted into OPEB, as you know, the last few years. And if we don't spend any of this, you know, incrementally as the budget amount rises, then the amount representing 3% will go up a little, but we can put a little free cash into stabilization as we need to keep that. But that's set pretty well at 3%. Page 4, this gives you basically a chart that runs you through the numbers from the early years, 2009, up to the current, bottom to top. Now all the accounting processes have changed. It used to be top to bottom, now they're bottom to top. So the top chart shows free cash and stabilization combined together. For 2018, we've got 3,666,392, which is 878,975 in stabilization. And you can see again, if you look back, we were at 434, as I said, in 2009, 436 in stabilization for a total of only 870,000 in stored assets. So we've been able to incrementally each year increase that balance, and I'd like to stay at about this amount. So I don't see us, I see spending anything that raises above that to lower the tax impact. Now the other turn is going to be, when time comes, is going to start tightening the budget as well. This year I'm looking at level services, no new hires, no new hours. I'll be closely scrutinizing, and I've been and as will the Finance Committee, to see what we can do to begin controlling that side of it. Though when I get through the explanation over the last 8 years, we've been controlling our expenditures pretty well. Down below, the reserve fund. Now, $70,000 we've had in the reserve fund. We couldn't afford $70,000 when I first got here. We got to the point of 70, and we set it there. We haven't increased it. Last year, they only spent a small amount of it, and so they returned 68.5. It might be an area we start looking at if we need to reduce the budget, you know. And the trend has been that way in recent years, and that's a good sign. I mean, it means the budgets are better. It means the need for this use of free cash, which is for extraordinary and unexpected, unforeseen only. So that might be an area to look at. You've got some, with the charts, you've got graphs that go with it, so that's all that is. Average tax bills on page 6. If you look back at 2009, again, at the bottom, gave you the average value per home, tax rate, tax bill, average. Look all the way to the top, 2018, which is the current, at 4.39. If you average those, the average annual increase in the tax bill is 3.52 from 2009 to the date. That's reasonable. It's not obviously where everybody would like to be, but it's within our our means, but I continue to trend it and see where that goes. It's got, again, a chart down below, graph showing the numbers. Next page, on page 7, analysis of the property tax levy by class.
Mr. Town Administrator, will you take some questions?
Sure.
while you-
Yep.
How does 3.52% average increase in budget, or, excuse me, tax bills, shape up with the rest of the Commonwealth, if you know?
Well, there's many above us, there's some below us. We're, you
Okay.
know, it's- For communities similar to ours, I think if you looked at what Kristen gave you just a few weeks ago, showed some local
Yeah.
communities, we're below where they were. At Bolton and Boxborough, Harvard, if you remember when they came in to set the tax rate. But it's a tight group, you know, it's close, you know? And part of the reason we're close is that single tax rate, because we don't have a diversified tax base.
No, I understood, I remember about the tax rate, I was just wondering about the increase in the tax bill over the past
Well,
20 years.
so the increase, like I said, I'm averaging 3.5% a year since
Right.
2009.
And how does that
And as I
stack?
said, there's many above us and some
Many
below
below
us.
us, okay.
You know,
Well, that's something the Finance Committee can research.
yeah, I'm sure they will. I'll give you some of that when we get to the expenditure side of
Sure.
matters. So, we have an undiversified tax base. That's one of the structural impediments we have on the revenue side, along with large portions of property abated and exempted. We don't have large components of other revenues, meaning meals taxes, hotel taxes, other things, fee for service, and the rest of it. If you look at, when I first came here, we had a noticeable industrial and commercial tax base, meaning by noticeable, higher than where we are now, and we've leveled off. So since 2009, if you look at this chart, we're running about 91% residential. You know, we're running about 4.5% commercial, and we've declined to less than 2%, though the average shows in the right-hand column at 2%. We're below 2% industrial. When I came here, it was about 87% residential. We had about 7% industrial, or 7% commercial, and about 3.5% industrial. So we're becoming less diversified, and it's difficult now when you're looking at the tax base undiversified like that it's the residential taxpayers that are paying, you know. So below is the pie chart, shows you. But we have leveled off. It would be nice if economic development, the EDIC, but this community, for those who participate in the process, have never been big proponents of bringing in large, you know, commercial, and certainly not industrial necessarily. It's the smaller businesses, but for economic development, that is not gonna do much to move the needle from residential. The next page. At the same time, so from 2008 to 2017, looking at the commitment with regard to property taxes and what's uncollected, we're running at, this year, less than 1/2 of 1% being delinquent. And if you look down, I didn't average that one out, but that's probably close to the average. It's, even during the difficult times, 2008, we had the recession. Recession technically ended in 2009, but has lingered longer than that. So the folks so it rose to 1.1% in 2011, but it's gone back down to where it had been and that's a tribute to the people that live here and their understanding of paying their taxes even when there are difficult economic times. But it's not easy, and it's getting more difficult all the time. Local receipts, getting back to the undiversification of our tax base, our local receipts provide such a small amount of the total revenues, and they're not growing much, and I'll get to that percentage later in the thing. So, and it's worse for state aid. State aid has gone down for us. So we need to find some revenues, if long-term, if you want to do something to,
Marijuana tax.
there you go, there you
It's
go.
limited to 3%, thought of that.
Not unless
Yeah.
we increase it to 100% of our liquor licenses and we become a
On page 9, I'm a conservative estimator when it comes to revenues, because the worst thing I'd wanna do, and I don't necessarily mean this as criticism, but the state and many of the communities, they overestimate revenues because it's easier to make commitments on programs and other things that you're gonna offer folks, and then during the year, invariably, the revenues are running behind what was estimated to build your budget on, and they gotta start cutting mid-year. We've never had to do that, and it's because, and this graph will show it, I've never not run below, on the estimates to the actual. I try to keep them close without being unreasonably or rashly close, because again, so that just shows you that we've never had to go looking for more money during the year. Local aid, if you look on page 10, so in 2009, we were getting more local aid than we are now. So it was 548,000. And it shows the Neshoba Regional School District local aid as well. So it's the municipal, so we get very little, but the districts, and it's always the case, the schools get the preponderance of it, as they probably should. So 548 in 2009, and this year we got 488.
That's not even keeping rate with inflation.
That's negative inflation, though. We're losing money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be keeping up with inflation, because it's never gone below zero that I know of, you know. The district, 7779, they're at 78, they haven't, you know, net, haven't gone up much, but they've gone up.
But again,
And we've gone down, so.
not keeping up with inflation.
And
Does this local aid include also, no, it wouldn't include bus transportation, would it?
yeah, it would be local aid for the district.
For the district?
Yeah, they get that. We get the lottery money, basically, and we get a few small pilots, in lieu of taxes, you know. But the numbers are so small, like the local receipts,
Yeah.
that we're challenged on the revenue side. We don't have runaway growth, in my opinion, on the expenditure side. We have challenges, structural impediments, on the revenue side. Next page, new growth. Again, we had more new growth in 2009 than we have in 2018. 491,887, 358, and these are actuals, these aren't the estimates. 358. I had an estimate below that because we estimate in February and March. Now it is spiking up and down, but it's trending down, if you look at the. Now, we'll be over 300 for next year, I hope. Got some new development going on in the next couple of years, maybe, based on what you hear about some of the things. Yeah, I
It's still
agree.
way below where it was
Yeah.
9 years ago.
I mean, and if you go back before that, we had larger numbers going into the early 2000s. There was runaway
Well, yeah.
housing prices and all the rest. I mean, Christ, we had pockets full of new growth. But luckily, we saved some of that, and that's why we got money in the bank. But, you know, those days, I wouldn't count on them in the future. But again, you see where they're starting, the housing bubbles, I mean, people don't learn from the past. I don't get it, you know.
You're gonna invest the stabilization fund in Bitcoin, right?
Uh-huh.
Bitcoin. Yeah, I see your point. The other, yes, it would be nice to have new growth. That is the major revenue increase that we can count on. On the other hand, there are also expenses that come with some new growth.
Yeah.
Certainly the new growth that I think you're anticipating for next year in the ARN is, or AN, is comparably low expenditure,
Low impact
low impact on the
and
expenditure
high
side.
taxes.
So go, page 12. So these are budgeted revenues. And it just tells you the same picture I've been giving you in columns in a chart only. But it's not a good sign on the revenue side. I mean, to me, economic development drives community development. But if you define economic development in a way that it doesn't diversify to expand your tax base and the numbers are small, it doesn't bend the needle, you know? it's better than not having any economic development, but those are choices that communities make as to the nature of the community they're gonna live in and the results of it. So if you go to page 13, now this is the budget side, and the 2 pages that you just, should be 3 pages you just got. If you take the back 3 of the old one and just substitute these 3, 13, 14, and then there's one unidentified because I pulled it from something else I was doing and it wasn't part of it. But I thought if I was gonna go through this, we'd do it now. So the general municipal budget, and I broke these down, these 2 pages together down to match my budget report. So when on page 13, top left corner, general municipal budget, that's the departmental wages and expenses, annual. That's all. And if you look at the bottom of the left column, it's gonna say average annual percentage, okay? So that's gonna run across the bottom. So from 2010 to 2018, the general municipal budget grew at, and this is the budget, not the actual, because I'll give you that figure too, 3.69% on average. That's, so all the departments, their wages, salaries, and expenses on an annual basis averaged annual increases from 2010 to the current year of 3.69%.
And that includes health insurance and things like that?
Yes, the townwide expenses included, okay? Our insurance, our property and casualty, workers' comp, and our health insurance. And it includes the county retirement, which is pretty much uncontrollable for us, you know? So there's some big numbers in there that we don't control, but we've controlled enough of the others. And I would say this about our larger departments, which is public safety. And I won't do that tonight, but I'll get through when we go to the budget development process. So 3.69% budgeted, expenditure 3.9%, because as I told you in the free cash we're giving back, departments are not spending every dime they've got, and I appreciate that. And the fact of the matter is I'd rather give a little more if I think it's close and it's uncertain to me, but it's a meritorious request and it's legitimate and they've been controlling it to the best they can. I put a little more in that because we're gonna get it back. And we re-spend it in free cash, so we're not losing it, but it's better than coming up short in my opinion, or them spending right up to if they're worried that won't go on, you always say, well, they gave it to me, I better spend it or this. We don't have that mentality here, thankfully, you know, for the most part. They don't need it, they don't spend it, we get it back. That's how we grew our stored assets. The Neshoba Regional School District assessment, during that same period of time, budgeted. Now they do spend you don't get them back on the assessment, I can tell you that. I don't mean that as criticism, by the way.
Just a statement of fact.
Yes, it is. 3.53 year over year net average increase, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
It was much worse years ago, I can tell you that. Minuteman assessments, even better. The problem with Minuteman is it's up and down and it spikes all the time. You never know from year to year, depending on the students. A negative 1.54. If you go back to 2010 and look at what we were paying, which was $800,000 for the assessment in 2018 present, it's $630,999. But that's a 9.25% increase over last year. So when you're trying to budget, that's tough, you know? Debt service. So by percentage increase and by dollar value, one of the areas for the future that we need to control, if we're going to control the long-term success of continuing to have stored assets and unused levy capacity, is our debt service. So that has averaged annually an increase of 8.3%. If you look back to 2010, we had an annual debt payment of $1,275,000. For this year, it's $2,352,478. And as you know, we've got 2 large school projects. One we've begun to load up this year. We've got a small part of our assessment at Minuteman is going to be for the annual debt of the new school, but within a year or two, they're fully loaded up. And it's going to be a few $100,000 a year just for the Minuteman. And then we'll see when Neshoba begins their project and what it is. Now here's the other thing. That portion of our annual debt payment
over 65% of that is school project related. Makes sense. It's our large, we've got the center school, the Hale School that was done, the high school, and they're coming up. So if we're gonna bend the needle on the debt side, that's the place it's gonna have to happen. And we don't control that as much as we would individual municipal departments. So in 2010, that portion of our debt that was related to the school was $340,000. This year it's $1,493,000. That's the dollar value for the school debt on our 2.5.
Look at the increase in the percent.
Yeah. So it was 26% of our annual debt payment in 2010. It's now 63.49%. And it's gonna go up. What did we put on since 2010? Well, the center school was
Center?
huge. Center, yeah. But And- other than center? And that's pretty much it for because Hale was already on there.
Yeah.
School, it's basically center. And that was that was a huge bang for us.
I thought the athletic fields at the high school, was that borrowed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's their debt, so it comes through our assessment as overlapping debt.
Oh, all right.
So that's not, but that's just, all right, that's the center school.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember how they structured that debt, because they did it the year after I left.
But that was a small amount compared to what we're talking. That's not 18, 20 million, which is where we
It's a
are with
couple
school,
million.
you know. But anyway, these are instructive when you go through them, and if you're reminded, as I am each year, of seeing where the structural impediments are and how difficult it is with an undistracted, structurally impeded revenue side, then it's left to the expenditure side. And I think these annual increases at less than 4% for municipal budgeting, could you get better? And we'll try to, but we're not running uncontrolled. Page 14, continuation of the same thing. So debt under our total budget is somewhat of uncontrollable, and we've got to try to do something about it if we can. It's going to be difficult. Special articles raised and appropriate. So I don't see it as the salary and expense schedules of our municipal departments, but special articles raised and appropriate from 2010 to 2018, the average annual increase has been 6.6%. And that's all those, the back page of my budget report, legal, go down the list. They're all special projects, they're routine, not capital. This is non-capital now because I got a column for capital. And for example, legal went up. I had to plug in another, I think it was 30 or 40,000 in legal for this year, so that spiked the raise and appropriate, because it's not a huge number. I mean, it's not compared to, some of the larger ones, but it was 349, 941 in 2010, 547 in this year. Special articles appropriating transfer that's a budget push, so it's not even worth going over, and it's a small number. Now, the other one is capital. This is non-debt capital that we pay each year. And that's averaging an increase of 13% a year since 2010. Now, I am using hundreds of thousands of dollars in free cash to buy that dollar amount down. So when you look at that figure, much of that's coming from stored assets, but it's the percentage increase. So that'd be the other area for me, that if we need to begin to, more closely scrutinize and try to control, to try to reduce the trend line for it. Now, tax recap items, 4.79, which is a little high, but most of that's county retirement, and there's not a damn thing we can do about that at this moment, except control the increase in our head count. And at this point, I'm looking for no increase in the head count. And the rest of my tenure, I'd like to try to keep that and give my replacement a fighting chance when it comes to that. Total budget, because that's important too. So you take all of these independent columns together, our total municipal budget, looking at the bottom again, since 2010, it's increased at an average annual rate of 3.69%. Again, under 4. And these charts are combined with either the pie or the line graphs or whatever. I have one last page, and this is the budget to actual. So
And it was, you should have got 3 pages.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and I'll just quickly, this is actual, which, just wanted to let you know, we're spending less than we're budgeting. We don't lose that money. It enables us to build our stored assets so we can use it. And I won't go through all the individuals, but if you go to the far right, average annual increase by percentage, because I think those, for me, those are the things that I like to know. You know, what's the rate of increase? Up the top, we've got the revenue side, so if you look at the bottom right corner of revenue, but we're at 3.64 for recurring annual revenues now. This doesn't incur one-time shots that we get. So you got property taxes, 3.96. Local receipts, look at it, it's 1.66 since 2008. And this chart goes back farther, but I threw it in any event. So our local receipts since 2008 have averaged less than 2% growth. Our state aid is down almost 2% since 2008. I mean, it's difficult to overcome. Then you get under the expenditure side, far right column again, average annual increase by percentage. Goes down 3.13, 3.61 for the individuals. You read to the left, it's municipal government. Again, that's the departments. Debt service, so it shows the same numbers except actual. So the comparison of the percentage ratio is a little different because we're spending less than we're taking in. So I'm giving you the budgeted, which is what you've actually raised and appropriated. We're spending less, but.
What did you say the average increase in the tax bill was again? I thought I wrote it down, but I did 3.5, is that what you said? 3.52?
The average annual?
Yeah.
Yeah, go back to that page where it was 3 point something.
It's probably fairly close to.
So close to the increase.
Yeah,
in the
page
increase.
6, 3.52,
3.52.
3.529.
Thank you.
Because there's other revenues that come in, so it's, but it's not a big, you know. But I will say this, I think we're managing as well as we're able to reasonably well. There's always more. I'm pretty conservative with expenditures, but there are some things, and I know, for example, there's been some discussions on the educational incentive, and it is something that can be looked at. It is something we do control. It was something that the town, and I've given you the reports, and it's something the board at this point would be the ones under the policy that if they wanted to make changes, they could. My thought would be this, is that until it's needed, this was a commitment we made to the non-union employees to bring them where union employees were, and it was approved at a town meeting back when the Quinn bill, and we had the big, and the other thing is part of our bylaw, when the clerical union agreed to decertify itself, which is a rare occurrence. In fact, the state tried to get me for unfair labor practice because they said no one go decertify. I said, well, and somebody filed in Worcester. That's not even part of our union, but you can do that, right? So I knew it was coming, and we talked about it, but it was the right thing to do, and all the members said they would go with me if we had to. But in any event, an important thing, and in return, we said we'd keep them where they were at the benefits they had. So that's in the bylaw. If we were to make any changes to the educational incentive, we'd have to go back to the town and get the bylaw changed for them. And they're the preponderance of that. And I'm gonna share with you a chart of every person, and I've given it to the finance committee, and so everybody knows who's getting what and all the rest of it. But as we had stated, this came when, there were teachers unions and police unions getting educational incentive of higher percentages. And the point was that when I argued against the Quinn bill, which would go to 10, 20, and 25, and we're at 5, 10, and 15 because the town didn't accept the Quinn bill, but accepted giving an educational incentive to the police back in the 60s or 70s, and this came in the late 1999 or 2000, is that if we believe that a better educated employee is a better employee, then why don't we do something for others, which was passed, and that's been in place at 5, 10, and 15 like the police union went. Police union's not going away unless you want to blow up something. So the only thing we'd be doing is, if we're going to take it, is we're taking it away from non-union. but that's something to consider, or grandfathering it in for everybody who's got it, which means we wouldn't have to change the bylaw, we could stay where we were, nobody gets hurt, but decide that it's something that's too rich for the others. I'm not here to debate it, I just wanted to let you know that I'll give you the chart, and we go through the budget process and for upcoming year, and if there's some interest in that.
We can consider that, but this is a nice overview of the town's finances over the last 10 years. Having said that, I will ask my colleagues if they have any thoughts or insightful comments.
Yeah, very useful. You know, both revenue and expenditures under 4, at least on the operating side. Capital, I think, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's been a long time since I've looked at the capital schedules, but I think Flag Hill and Hale are both coming off either next year or the year after that, and then most of our debt's gonna be, I think, Center School and Pompo
And Minuteman.
and Minuteman, which explains those numbers, because those two projects are easily 3 times the Pompo size, the size of the.
Well, we're also gonna have the lower village, if we can encumber some of that.
Well, that's
Yeah, that's
small
not on
potatoes.
the,
That's
that's
just
not
bands right
added
now,
yet.
so it's
That's
not
on bands,
there yet,
but
it will
that's,
be.
so when
Yeah.
you're saying coming off, we got stuff coming on too.
She just said today it may not wind up in permanent bonds, it may just stay with bands, but, yeah.
Yeah, the amount is
We're still
small
gonna
enough
owe
that
it.
you could, but we're gonna pay it with interest,
Right.
but it'll be small.
Right.
The library, I mean, that's coming, right? Or
Uh,
something.
We're gonna have to figure out what to do with the old town hall.
Right.
But it just seems like as soon as something comes off, something goes on.
It's the nature of that, you know.
Things are going on faster than they're coming off. I know we kicked Pompo out as far as we possibly could to get us close to when Flag Hill and Hale came off. We made it almost by a couple of years. But
That brings up an excellent point, which this report does disclose, is an excellent financial planning on the part of the town and the town administrator, try and meet our financial obligations without increasing the burden of living here in Stowe immeasurably. It's kind of, you know, in the past 10 years, we've gone up almost $5 on the tax rate, and that's troubling. But if you look over this analysis, you can see how it's generally forces outside of this board and this government's control. But there are certain things we can look to bring down the taxes even, the tax levy even further if possible. But having said that, I didn't mean to cut off my colleagues. Do you have any comments or
Nope, I
thoughts?
think it was
That was very helpful.
a good overview.
Good financial stewardship.
I would, it isn't, to me, it's significant fact. Our police, fire, and highway, just looking at the head counts, have remained almost unchanged for over 15 years. And 2 of them are union shops. So I will just, you know, and they're our largest by staffing. I mean, there are communities where those numbers, you know, are going up routinely, and the costs involved in that, you know. So that's a tribute to the departments and the people that run them and the people that are staffing them. Basically running with the same numbers on the street, front line, as they, for decades.
Any other thoughts or comments? Then I thank the town administrator. We'll move on to the next item, which is liaison reports. And normally I don't say this, but I would just, given the fact that we might be going into executive session, ask my colleagues to be brief. Ingeborg.
I won't, nothing, I have nothing.
Tom.
Police sent a cruiser to Maynard for their parade. The Maynard police were very happy with that, and I'll let it go at that.
Mr. Salvi.
I got library building committee tomorrow night, and something that we might discuss in executive session, so I got nothing.
Dog.
We've already covered this activity a week ago. Shout out again to Karen Stams. Lake Boone, we have hit a roadblock in moving forward expeditiously on rules, recodification, review, everything else, because in order to do our full disclosure, input and everything else, we would need significant time for meetings with the public, residents of the lake and others concerned with it. And town of Hudson has a strange way of, or a different way, characterize that, very much different. The deadline for their articles in final form, not placeholders, is January 29th. There's no way that we, the Lake Boone Commission, can stick to, reach a timetable for meaningful review and do all of that and get it to town meeting for this year. So we've lost a year in the process. That doesn't mean we're giving up on it, but we will be now working towards, perhaps optimistically, a fall town meeting, but another season will go by with some antiquated rules.
Well, I'm
That's it.
glad our Lake Boone representative is not discouraged, and I'm glad we got to work Lake Boone into tonight's meeting. That brings us to executive session proposal, and I will call for a vote. Is anyone ready to make it? But first I would ask, are there people other than the board and its staff who would like to be present at this executive session meeting? Could we list, whoever makes the motion, could you list those people?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to convene an executive session together with Mr. Kupczynski, Mr. Wilbur, and Ms. Sfera pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, and Sections 21A2 and 21A3 for the purpose of approving executive session minutes and to adjourn thereafter.
Thank you, I so declare. This will be a roll call vote. Ingeborg?
Aye.
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 And I assume that when you made that motion, Mr. Salvi, it was to adjourn immediately
That was
thereafter?
included.
Actually,
That was
yeah.
included in the motion.
Missed it? Then,
You actually said it.
I missed it.
I know you did.
I was so busy.
I'm just gonna